Welcome to episode 117 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I am your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio on the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who has just returned from a big-time, really important conference, John Scott Sloat.
Yeah, it's travel season again. Travel's back on after COVID. So
Yeah. We might circle back around and talk a little bit about your experience on this.
Yeah. We could do that.
Yeah. Let's table it. A little teaser. That's what the radio people call that.
Is it? Well, you have a degree in that, so
yeah.
I do not. So you would know. Yes,
indeed. So, we are recording on a Monday morning after the NCAA tournament got down to its Final Four. Mm-hmm. But I feel like before we talk about that, we should do our sort of standard business here, take care of the typical arrangements here. If you'd like to contact the show, you can find us on Twitter at VNSPod, which can I just say, by the way, I don't know. Past week, it felt like Twitter was an especially awful place. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's typically I feel like 80% of Twitter is awful. And there's maybe 20% that's redeeming. But I don't know. Maybe just
I was at a conference. I missed.
Okay.
I wasn't on Twitter that much. So.
Okay. Well, you were probably better off that way. If you'd like to email the show, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. We are on Facebook and on YouTube, Various and Sundry Podcast. And we would love for you to go ahead and leave us a 5-star rating on whatever platform you access the show. We did have a listener, Mark in Indiana, send us a screenshot. Did you
Elder Mark?
Yes. That he went ahead and provided a rating on Spotify, but apparently there haven't been enough on Spotify for them to show it publicly, which seems odd to me.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, so that's the marching orders.
Yeah, so all you Spotify listeners have got to go out and rate it so that we can, so people can actually see.
Yeah, if you have Spotify, go give us 5 stars.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, as we mentioned, this was a big weekend. Before we do sports, do we want to take a little bit of a left turn here and talk Oscars?
Yeah, that might be a U-turn, not a left turn.
We should probably acknowledge that neither of us watched.
No. But we woke up this morning to some interesting news.
Yeah, all the buzz on social media, on Twitter.
The first streaming show ever won Best Picture.
Okay.
And Will Smith hit Chris Rock.
Yeah, I saw that clip. Okay. And I saw them. The clip I saw played the joke that Chris Rock made a joke about Will Smith's wife.
And she's recently shaved her head because of a illness that causes her to lose her hair.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Okay. And he made some joke about that, basically.
It wasn't a particularly good joke.
No, it was
a G.I. Jane joke, which I think is a pretty obscure movie from late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah. Well past a lot of people in the audience.
We're outside the window for that joke.
Yeah. And so, as a result, Will Smith storms the stage is probably a strong word. I saw some people use that term, and I'm like, stormed? Like he walked up onto the stage with some purpose, but it wasn't like sprinting up there. And he walked up and
open hand slapped.
Yeah, Chris Rock in the face.
Yeah, pretty hard from
what it looked like. Yes.
Yeah. I know you're suspicious that this was staged.
Yeah, a little bit.
I'm less. I think this was a real moment.
Then I guess I'm just surprised at the aftermath of the response. Then, that there was no response from Chris Rock, other than just he took it and then nothing.
Tried to recover. I mean, he's clearly looking around what do you want me to do?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's. I don't know. It was there's just something that felt off about it to me.
Yeah, it was certainly a joke in poor taste.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Totally,
right. No doubt about that.
Totally.
But I also think that Will Smith overreacted there's part of me that wonders if he got upset, decided to go up there, and then got up there and went, "What on earth do I do?"
Yeah.
And went with the
open hand slap.
Open hand slap.
Okay.
Which is better than the punch, I suppose.
I guess. And probably, in one sense, better than – I think the other alternative is maybe like the two-hand shove to the chest. Like that's not a punch. It's not an open hand slap, but but that feels like it's escalating something. Whereas I suppose the open hand slap feels like one and done. Like I've made my point and then I walk away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I guess you're not expecting Chris Rock to swing back.
Yeah. Is there anything more high society than storming a man in a tux and slapping him in the face?
I don't know.
Is there anything more elite than that?
Challenging him to a duel?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like challenging them to fence? Like
yeah, fencing would have been
here's your petard.
If they started fencing on stage, then I think this is staged. Okay. If they start fencing at the Oscars.
Yeah, it was just weird.
It was, and then I think just 10, 15 minutes later, accepted an Oscar for Best Male Actor.
Yes,
which is so weird to me. Like, what do you say?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I can't remember the last time I watched any of the Oscars, so this is just not in my realm of interest. But there
was a time in my 20s where I tried to watch all the Oscar movies, and they're all just really sad. From there's nothing enjoyable necessarily about them, but it's a grind to watch them all, and they make next to no money. That's the other thing.
And that's the thing. They often are so artsy in one sense that it feels like you tried to make a movie to win an Oscar. That you're appealing to a very narrow group of people who actually vote on this, rather than making a movie that would appeal to a large audience. And I'm not saying that every movie has to appeal to a large audience. There's a place for niche movie making. Okay,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I don't want every movie to be a comic book superhero movie. That's I'm not opposed to those things, but like not every movie has to be Marvel or DC.
Yeah. And I'm starting to get burned out on the Marvel movies, but I feel so invested at this point. I'm like 20, 25 movies deep. I got to keep going. I got to see this through,
Okay. Yeah, I'm wondering so let's say there's 25 Marvel movies. We don't know the exact number, right?
No, I didn't look it up. It's at least 20.
Okay. Let's say 25 just for the sake of math. Okay. I'm wondering if I've seen half. I'm not sure I've seen half.
That would be a fun summer topic. Let's go through all the Marvel movies and see which ones Matt has seen.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe half. I think half. And then of course they're spinning off. They're doing the series on.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you keep up with that? Eventually,
that's why you watch it when it comes out. You see it once and you check it off the list.
Eventually, we're going to saturate the market with that, though, right? Like, there's got to be the pendulum swing. Like, Marvel is going to run out of stuff, or they're going to get to a point where they put some stuff out and people are like, "I'm done. I'm not going to watch this."
They haven't hit that yet.
No,
yeah,
it's crazy. All right. Well, speaking of crazy, let's talk NCAA tournament.
Yeah. I did not. The entertainment section. We've never done one of those before.
Yeah. So what I find fascinating is we are down to our Final Four. And for all of the buzz and excitement around upsets, and there were plenty, your Final Four is as blue blood gets.
Mm-hmm.
Villanova might be the only school in that you wouldn't necessarily call blue blood, but based on their success in the last 10 years, they are blue blood.
Yeah, they're ascending.
Certainly. They've won 2 national titles.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 3. It's 2. Jay Wright's won 2, I think.
I believe 2.
With Villanova. In any case, so you've got Kansas will play Villanova and Duke will play North Carolina. Did you watch any of the Elite Eight games?
I watched North Carolina against St. Peter's.
That was a disappointingly
Yes. Seems like St. Peter's came back to earth.
Yeah. Yeah, it felt like that.
Which inevitably happens to those deep run teams.
Yeah. When you have a double-digit seed in the Elite Eight, that's not surprising.
I'm excited for a Duke-UNC game, though. I think that'll be a lot of fun.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's an appropriateness to that, given that Coach K has announced he's retiring. So, and North Carolina ruined Coach K's last game at Cameron Indoor Stadium at Duke, and beat him pretty solidly. I think beat him by 10. I think 10 or 12. So it wasn't like even close. And so, this is an opportunity for Duke to get revenged, but Carolina has figured something out. They are not playing like an 8 seed.
Yeah, they're playing really well.
And then the other side, who knows, between Kansas and Villanova. Villanova looked really good, but they lost one of their best players.
Achilles, right?
Torn Achilles.
Yeah.
And Villanova's not deep. I think they only play typically 7 guys. So now they're down to 6 guys. Like, that could be trouble for them.
Yeah.
So, for all of the excitement of the upsets, and there were plenty, when you get down to the Final Four, we get to Blue Bloods. Let's talk some bracket challenge. So this might arguably be my worst performance in a tournament bracket challenge I've ever had.
What place are you in?
I think I'm in 34th out of 40.
35th.
35th out of 40.
And one guy didn't fill out his bracket.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't think I was counting it in the 40.
Oh, you're right.
There's
you're
41.
Right. There's 41.
So I was not counting the person who did not fill out his bracket. I think this is the first year I've ever picked where I didn't get a single Elite 8 team.
Ugh.
That's terrible. But let's run through the stand. Well, and you, since we're not going to talk the top, we're going to talk top 10. You're in 11th.
I'm in 11th place.
And although you still have some points remaining available, it's impossible for you to win.
It's impossible for me to win, which is probably for the best.
Yes.
Although I still have Duke winning it all, so there's a chance that could happen.
Yep. Why don't we go – so let's go 9th to 1st here then.
Okay. So in 9th place we have Ryan with Dr. Bama and Mr. Hyde.
Okay.
He has some points left.
Yeah, but he doesn't have a champion left. He picked Gonzaga, so he's basically
limited.
Yeah.
And then also tied for 9th, we have the G-Beard.
Yeah. You know who that is,
Oh, absolutely. Okay. I know who that is. Yeah. And he's got Duke. He's got a shot. Then Landon.
You know who that is?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 7th.
And he's got Duke.
Shocker.
And he might.
I think he's eliminated.
You think so?
Yep. Because
somebody
above him has Duke.
That's right. And then Danielle.
Yes. You know who that is?
Not sure I do.
She is a Grace alum.
Okay. And then Elder Mark.
Yes. Yes.
He's done.
Though he's done. He cannot.
He had Kentucky.
Yeah, he cannot
win.
What
a bad choice.
Yeah, that hurt.
Ooh. And then Jacob.
Yeah. Also, although he's in 5th, he can't win.
He can't win, no.
Now we're to some people who can win.
Yeah. Cameron.
Yes.
In Kuwait, apparently.
Yeah, interesting.
That's the name of his bracket. I mean, I know who that is.
Yeah, I do too.
Grant. We have 2 Grants in the top
Yes.
3. So third, we have Grant ask for the dissertation.
Yes. And he has Villanova winning it.
Yeah. So. And then we have Lee.
That's Lee from Milford.
Yep. He is one that contacted me after we talked through the Yellow Jackets this past summer and said he had the same problem at his house. And he actually came to my office to borrow equipment to take care of his Yellow Jackets.
I did not know this.
You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah.
You didn't tell me this.
He came to my office.
We are a full-service podcast.
We really are.
Including pest control, apparently.
And then we have another Grant in first, and he has Kansas winning it all.
Yeah. Yeah. So We will see. Though the funny thing is, since we record on Mondays, next week when we record, we won't know who the champ is. So we'll have to push.
We'll have a final though, right?
We'll know who the final is. Yeah. Yep. Yes, indeed. All right, we got to get moving along here. And NFL offseason, real quick. The Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins for like 5 picks.
Yeah, I saw that.
This caught me by surprise. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't know he was on the he was on the block. I mean, it felt like he was on the block for like 90 minutes, and then it was down to a couple teams, including my Jets.
Yeah.
And apparently Tyreek chose the Dolphins.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
An interesting move. Like I guess what they figure is we can find someone who does almost what Tyreek Hill does.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he is unique in his speed and his taking the top off the defense kind of, like you just have to account for him everywhere. But the Chiefs apparently felt like 5 draft picks to reload other parts of the team are more valuable.
Yeah.
And my guess is they're going to draft a wide receiver. I'm kind of hoping they're going to draft one of the Ohio State wide receivers.
There's a lot of talk of
Olave, probably.
There's talk of an Ohio State wide receiver going to the Jets as well.
Yeah, I don't want that to happen.
I know you don't. We ruin Ohio State wide receivers.
You do. You ruined Devin Smith.
2 or 3 of them, yeah.
Yeah. Please don't take one of my Buckeyes.
I literally have no say.
Well, we're assuming that the Jets front office listens to the pod, so that was not an appeal to you. That was an appeal to the higher-ups.
Joe Douglas, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of people who listen to the podcast, those of you who listened last week know that we're talking about complementarianism. And so this is part 2. Mm-hmm. We would encourage you, if you haven't listened to part 1 last week, it's going to be helpful probably to go back and listen to that. Because last week we laid out sort of the positive case for what is complementarianism and why we find it to be the biblical view for understanding how men and women should function within both the church and within the home. Mm-hmm. And so what we did last week was present sort of the positive case, and we tried our best. And I think we're largely successful.
BB plus, yeah.
Yeah, to avoid answering objections, just trying to make the positive case. So this week we are going to talk about common objections to complementarianism. So, John, why don't you get us started? I wanted to repeat our definition of complementarianism from last week just so that we kind of get it on the table there. So why don't you go ahead and
Yeah, so complementarianism is the view that God created male and female to complement, not say good things, but to correspond right? That was the word we used. To each other in reflecting the character of God and purpose in home, church, and society. It holds that both male and female are created in the image of God and have equal dignity and value before God, but have been given different roles within the home and the church.
Yeah, so there you go. All right.
Yeah, do you want me to – how do you want to do this?
I don't know.
We have 7 of these, and it's not all the objections that are out there, but we've tried to you've tried to group them together and bring them together in certain ways. So do you want me to read the objection?
Sure.
And you respond? Does that work?
Sure.
Okay. Objection 1. Galatians 3:28. The verse that goes, "There is neither Jew nor Greek, male nor female." That verse seems to level the playing field, so to speak. Seems to say that there's no difference here. There's no difference in roles.
Yeah.
So that's the first objection to complementarianism.
Yeah, and I think we've mentioned this, but typically the opposing view to complementarian is egalitarian.
Oh, we haven't. I don't think we've used that word.
So, that we should probably. And basically, it's just egalitarians do not think that there should be any distinctions between men and women in terms of how they function within the church. Every ministry opportunity, office, et cetera, should be open to them. And oftentimes they also will they reject male leadership within the home as well, seeing more mutuality as opposed to headship.
And there is a spectrum there as well, like there is on complementarianism as well, right?
Yes.
So
Yep.
I've run into some egalitarians that are like, well, we can have women elders, but we can't have a lead female pastor.
Yep.
So
all sorts of
yeah,
variations.
there's a big spectrum.
So Galatians 3:28 is a common text that that people will point to and say, well, when Paul says there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, no male and female, that what Paul is doing is eliminating those distinctions and that should be applied to understanding how women participate in the ministry of the church. My simple response is that's not what the text is about.
Yeah, it seems to be more about dignity before God.
The text is about how a person is made right with God, and it's on the basis of faith in Christ, regardless of gender, socioeconomic status, or ethnicity.
Which is the larger argument of Galatians generally.
Yes.
Yeah.
And elsewhere, the same apostle who says that there is says this makes distinctions between Jew and Gentile in terms of how God is working and things like that. And so he's clearly, to me, not making this blanket statement of therefore all distinctions are utterly obliterated, and this is the sort of overriding text that seems to contextualize other texts that seem to make prohibitions about women in certain ministry roles.
Okay, let's move on to objection. I'm gonna press us forward.
Yeah, we got to keep pace here. Yep.
Objection 2. The Bible all over the place gives examples of females in leadership. I mean, think about Deborah or think about Priscilla. She's listed before her husband in some passages. Why doesn't this just kind of give us the green light?
Because none of them are referred to as elders or pastors.
Yeah, it's an anecdotal example.
It is. It is. That women can and do perform, leadership roles in one sense within the people of God and within the church. It's just that they're not allowed to hold the office of elder/pastor. And I would also think that it's helpful to say here, I think egalitarians regularly overread those texts, that they trot out every example of a woman doing something in the New Testament and go, see, women should be pastors.
Yeah.
Well, that's a big jump. They'll also point to
the end of Romans.
Romans, yes, with Phoebe. Or in Philippians, Euodia and Syntyche. Paul calls them out in chapter 4. And, one well-known egalitarian scholar basically is like, see, obviously that they're in positions of leadership in the church. And I think, no, they're not. I mean, they might be, but you can't just conclude that. There's nothing in the text that tells you that. It's just that you claim, well, Paul wouldn't call them out if they're not leaders. And I want to say, I'm sorry. In a small house church, if you have two people, regardless of gender, and they've got an argument going, that can tear that small house church apart in a heartbeat.
Oh, yeah.
So that doesn't assume that they're leaders.
All right. One last thing I'll say about that is I find Kossenberger helpful on this, where he, in one of his books, I can't remember which, talks about the general pattern throughout Scripture that we see as male leadership. We see exceptions like Deborah and things like that. Okay.
Yes.
Objection 3. It's a different world. There are cultural factors here. Women couldn't women couldn't read and write during this time. Therefore, how could they lead? So now that we have a different culture, we can do some of those things. So respond, Matthew.
Sure. I mean, under this category, I've got sort of 3 different variations of it. The first is sort of a general objection. Like you said, women were less educated, culture was less enlightened. Yes. So that the argument runs, well, women had less access to education. They weren't as knowledgeable because of cultural factors, and that's different now. So that prohibition doesn't apply. There's also with regard to specific texts, they will argue that, for example, 1 Timothy 2, the the context there in Ephesus is you have these women who are self-assertive and false teachers, and so Paul is prohibiting in that particular situation, but not making a universal prohibition. That there's something going on in Ephesus that Paul is responding to a specific situation rather than making a universal prohibition. To me, I would say, first of all, that's not to those first two. That's not how the Bible argues.
Mm-hmm.
It roots it in the created order.
Yeah, and that's why that Timothy passage is so.
Yeah.
I mentioned that this is a really important passage to me.
Yes,
and for that reason.
The argument is not there are these women going around who are false teachers, and so we need to stop them. This is the created order. And I think that's an important argument there. The third sort of subcategory here is the current cultural developments demand revisiting or revising biblical views.
Particularly in cases of abuse.
Yes, the idea that complementarianism leads to abuse. The moment you have male headship, you've got abuse right there. That it somehow justifies abuse. And here's where we just have to remind ourselves that a distortion or misuse of a doctrine doesn't make the doctrine wrong.
That's right.
It makes the misuse of it wrong. Mm-hmm. I saw something. I crushed Twitter earlier, but I saw someone. I appreciated this. I can't remember the name of the person who tweeted this, but basically it was someone who said, "Look, I'm not a complementarian. I'm essentially egalitarian. We've got to stop using this complementarianism equals abuse stuff because I've seen it in just as many egalitarian church contexts as I've seen it in complementarian churches." So the argument that that it supports this is a misunderstanding of the doctrine itself.
That's way too reasonable for Twitter.
I know.
Let's move on. Objection 4: complementarians is a new development. There's only a word we've used for the last 30, 40 years, if that. It's rooted in America. It's rooted in these cultural dynamics that we have here.
Yes. My response is simply that while it may be true that the term complementarianism is a relatively newer term within the history of the church, the idea that prioritizes male leadership within the church and within the home has been the overwhelmingly consistent view in the history of the church until the last 100 to 200 years. Not to say you can't find exceptions. I'm not saying that. I'm aware that there are authors who pointed out example here, but the dominant view by far has been the priority of male leadership in the church and in the home. And the whole argument that it's just rooted in American cultural dynamics, I think, overlooks that large historical swath of evidence, as well as outside of the American context, the priority of male leadership in the home and in the church in other church contexts around the world.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to objection 5. Ephesians 5 It talks about wives submitting to their husbands, husbands loving their wives. Right before that, it says that we're supposed to submit to one another. And that piece of grammar there in Greek governs that whole section is how I've heard it put.
Yeah.
How do we get complementarianism from that?
Well, I think the simple answer is what the text actually says runs against that. So right before when you have that expression of submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ, what Paul is doing is saying essentially we are to live in a way that reflects how God has ordered creation and the home. And so within the home, this is what submission looks like because he goes on to talk about wives being submissive to their husbands and then talking about children obeying parents and servants, slaves obeying masters. And so there is a sense of mutuality, but within the appropriate sphere that God has designed it. And just the actual text that follows, Paul doesn't tell husbands to submit to their wives.
He could have used that word easily.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just the parallel that he draws between Christ and the church just breaks that down.
Sure.
Because Christ does not submit to the church.
Mm-hmm.
The church submits to Christ. So the argument in that passage of rooting wives' submission to their husbands in the home as a picture of how the church submits to Christ and how male leadership in the home, self-sacrificial, loving leadership, is a model of Christ loving the church. Just the parallel breaks down with mutual submission. It runs counter to what the actual argument says.
Okay. Objections, and we're flying through these quickly.
Yep. And we should make the caveat. Of course, these are more complicated arguments, and I'm giving general answers.
Objection 6. If women have the gifts required to be a pastor, who are you, Matt Harmon, to tell them they can't be? Why are you the gatekeeper here?
I am not the gatekeeper, actually. I believe Scripture is, though.
Yeah.
Nowhere does God allow or encourage the completely unsupervised or just unrestrained use of the gifts he gives his people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even apart from all of these considerations, think about what he has to do in 1 Corinthians. And regardless of what you think about the spiritual gifts, and that stuff, part of what he does in 1 Corinthians is say, you guys have to do this orderly. Mm-hmm. You can't just – if a person wants to speak in tongues, they can't just do it any old time they want. There's a process here in the gathering of the people of God. And if there's nobody to interpret, then that person has to zip their lip and say, okay, I can't share this in the congregation because there's no one to interpret. So God never just gives free rein to the exercise of gifts he gives. And so just because a woman may have the kind of gifts that would make her a qualified pastor or elder doesn't mean she is free to exercise them in that specific capacity. Mm-hmm. Now, she can exercise them in any number of different ways. I think there are plenty. There are men in churches who would be elder qualified, who have the gifts necessary, but are not pastors for whatever reason. Maybe it's time or circumstance or whatever. So, nowhere does Scripture enjoin the free exercise of gifts, however we want to use them.
Sure. And I kind of lumped 6 and 7 together there.
Yeah, well, 7 is the,
ad hominem.
Yeah, you have a woman who says, God's calling me to be a pastor. Okay, well, I would simply say, I think you've misunderstood what God is calling you to.
Yeah.
God doesn't call people to disobey him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might be called to exercise a kind of ministry that has similarities to pastoral ministry of shepherding or caring or even teaching and those sorts of things. But in terms of the office, I would say God doesn't call you to that. And let's be honest, we can easily misunderstand what we think God is calling us to.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of the subjective argument has to be, I think, carefully handled there.
All right, Doc, that's all 7.
Yeah, we blitzed through those.
We moved very, very quickly.
Yeah, and so if you want to crush me on Twitter, go ahead. That seems to be the appropriate format these days for crushing people.
All right. Anything you would reference real quick? We have a list of resources here. Yep. I can throw those in the show notes for us.
Yeah, I do want to highlight because one of them is a repeat from last week, but 3 of them are new.
Okay.
The first one is Kevin DeYoung, Let's Reason Together About Complementarianism, which is a short article dealing with, I think, 5 common objections to complementarianism. Short article on the Gospel Coalition website. That is actually I didn't check verbatim, but it looks pretty close to an excerpt from the book that he wrote called Men and Women in the Church that came out a year ago, maybe 2 tops.
Okay.
That's by Crossway. Also a very short, accessible kind of treatment of this issue within the specific context of the local church.
By the way, I just got a notification that our area is going to have a tornado siren in 10 minutes. So
well, that gives us a clock to get
yeah.
start the countdown clock.
Otherwise, it's going to be interrupted.
Yes, and we're actually pretty close to
We're
the siren.
pretty close to the siren. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last book I'd recommend is Andreas Kostenberger, God, Marriage, and Family, Rebuilding the Biblical Foundation. That'd
Awesome.
be a good place to look. All right, John, we got to move on to today in sports history for March 29th.
We're on the clock. 1945, Walt Clyde the Glide Frazier, New York Knicks guard in the 70s.
I threw that in there for you.
I appreciate that. Born in Atlanta, Georgia. 1976, 38th NCAA Men's Basketball Championship. Indiana beats Michigan 86-68. First time two teams from the same conference played in the title game. And IU finished undefeated.
Yes. Yeah. That was that might be the last – I think that's the last undefeated national champion we've had in college basketball.
Was that a Bobby Knight team?
Yes.
Okay. 82, 44th NCAA. Oh, we're going to get a run of these, aren't we? NCAA Men's Basketball Championship. North Carolina beats Georgetown 63-62. James Worthy named Tournament Most Outstanding Player. 19-year-old North Carolina freshman Michael Jordan makes a 16-foot jumper with 15 seconds to give the win. I believe that was against my beloved Patrick Ewing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That turned out all right for old Michael Jordan.
Yes. Yeah, he did okay.
That was kind of his not his coming out party, but like basically that propelled him to stardom on the national stage of like, oh, this guy's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. 1984. Yeah, 84. The Baltimore Colts moved to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And when they go back to Baltimore, they will not put Colts on the scoreboard. It says Indianapolis. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, if you go to a Ravens game today, they'll put Indianapolis on the scoreboard. They won't put Colts.
Which is a little ironic given the fact that the Ravens are the old Browns.
That's right.
That they essentially, they lost a team because another city stole it, and then they just went and stole another team.
Yeah. The nice thing about the Baltimore Ravens, though, is they changed their name, color scheme, all those things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if I know maybe Nate in Ohio can help me with this, but I think all of the franchise records stayed in
Cleveland. That's right. That's right. They didn't take any of that with them.
Right. So it's a little ironic that the Ravens have Ozzie Newsome as their general manager, who is a legendary Cleveland Browns tight end. So, all right, who do you like out of that? Well,
I always like Walt Frazier. But I'm willing to go 1982. That was a lot of stars in that series in that game.
Yeah, you had three Hall of Famers right there: James Worthy, Michael Jordan, and Patrick Ewing. And that was a little bit of an upset. Patrick Ewing, did he win? He won one NCAA title.
Yeah,
even though I think he appeared in 3 championship games because they lost to Michael Jordan. They won one year, and then they lost to Villanova the year Villanova shot 75 or 80% for the game, just out of their minds field goal percentage.
This is the game where is this the game where Patrick Ewing blocked goaltended the first 4 or 5 shots?
It might be. I'm not sure.
Okay,
but this game also was well known for Georgetown was up. They're trying to kill some clock, and one of their guards had a brain cramp basically and threw it directly to a North Carolina player. He was looking to reverse the ball and didn't really pay attention to – and he thought his teammate was up top and threw it right to a North Carolina kid.
Wow.
And that gave them the final possession.
My goodness.
Okay, so we're going to go with that one?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, one thing you liked.
I just got back from Dallas, Texas, and I was a part of the NetView conference, so the Network for Vocation and Undergraduate Education. It's a mouthful. Believe it or not, there's something like 200-plus schools there, 300-plus schools actually, and over 800 people. So it was despite its very niche topic.
Yeah.
It was a good conference. Got to make some good connections, made some friends, had a delicious steak. paid for by somebody else. So
Yeah.
it was lovely.
A very expensive steak.
It was a $40 steak paid for by somebody else. Yeah.
Do you remember the name of the steak place?
Oh, my goodness. No, it was an Argentinian grill
Oh, okay.
in Dallas, Texas.
Okay. Yeah. Nice job making friends with Righteous Mammon right there.
Yeah, yeah. It was wonderful.
Okay. I'm going to go with I'm reading my way through J.R.R. Tolkien's The Silmarillion. You ever read that?
I have not. I've heard it's a slog.
It is a bit of a slog. I've tried like 4 times before this, and now I'm just like I am going to brute force my way through this. I mean, it's got some interesting stuff in it so far. Part of it is I'm doing this in anticipation of Amazon is releasing their Lord of the Rings TV series this fall.
I'm not looking forward to that.
Well,
they use the word tasteful nudity to describe it, and that did not do any favors for me.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty broad category. Mm-hmm. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. But
we got 2 minutes before the siren.
Yeah. Okay. You're putting me on the clock here.
Yeah. I just want you to be aware.
Yeah. Okay. Well, assuming that the world will still be here after we finish this, maybe it'll be a real.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Though it looked pretty nice out when we walked in today, though brutally cold for this time of year.
Yeah.
All right. We have talked Oscars, something we didn't expect.
Yeah. We're entertainment gurus. We're on E now.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have talked NCAA tournament, bracket challenge. We've talked responding to common objections to complementarianism. We've talked about the emergence of some guy named Michael Jordan. We've talked about an expensive steak that John enjoyed.
It was wonderful.
And we talked about Tolkien's The Silmarillion. I think by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. And so all that's left to say is until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.